Hello everyone, good evening and welcome to Business Live. I am Sandra Esenam. Coming up this evening, Ghana's sovereign rating may be downgraded to negative if large fiscal deficits and public debt are not addressed. Finance Ministry seek input for 2021 budget preparation. And Parliament passes Development Finance Institution Bill to regulate non-banking multilateral corporations in the country. We have the details coming up after the break. That Ecobank Ghana, in collaboration with the African Union Development Agency, is opening a virtual platform for micro, small and medium businesses access government and private sector support. The move by the bank is expected to aid National Board for Small-Scale Industries in growing small enterprises. Here's a report by Ebenezer Sabute.
The initiative known as the MSME Academy is to empower about 100,000 micro, small and medium enterprises by next year. This will also be done through some business resource centers by the National Board for Small-Scale Industries in parts of the country. Head of Commercial Banking at Ecobank West Africa, Alfred Sichi, has been explaining.
One of the channels through which the AU is seeking to alleviate the pain of especially the vulnerable, and in this case we are talking about micro, small and medium enterprises. And so ORDA has partnered with the Ecobank Academy to come up with programs that would mentor MSMEs, because they are the most vulnerable in the business segments that we have, and yet they are the majority and they are the ones also that really employ the bulk of our people. And so the thinking of AUDA in collaboration with Ecobank is that we need to find ways of helping them to really navigate the uncharted waters that we find ourselves in, so that they will sustain their businesses and stay afloat.
Executive Director of the National Board for Small-Scale Industries, Kosi Aye, has assured that the MBSSI will provide the platform for the success of the program.
A lot of times people come up with interventions, but very few of them are able to implement that intervention. So our role is really in the implementation part of it, in implementing it, making sure that this academy reaches everyone across the nation in every district and region. So Ecobank will be leveraging our platforms. They will be leveraging our outreach and our reach across the nation. As you are aware, we have 182 currently business advisory centers spread across the nation. And so these are bringing one-stop shop services and supports, business development support to the doorsteps of Ghanaian MSMEs. So the work and the collaboration between ourselves and Ecobank is to ensure that we take this MSME Academy to the doorstep of Ghanaians, ensure that the new normal is actually enhanced and strengthened so that their businesses will thrive going forward.
Thank you very much.
Is that all?
Yes,
thank you.
MSMEs are expected to register with the bank to participate in the various virtual programs.
The Finance Ministry is seeking input from various business organizations, the public and financial institutions for the 2021 budget preparation. But why has this exercise started now, and why will the 2021 budget cover just the first 3 months of the next year? George Wafe has more.
Under the country's financial administration laws, the budget for next year should be presented to Parliament no later than November 30. This should mean that the presentation should happen 2 clear months before we enter the new financial year. It's therefore meant to present the government of the day an opportunity to start the year with an approved financial statement by a Parliament. It is also to ensure that before we start the new financial year, all the necessary debate has been done by Parliament so that the government of the day may have all the required legal backing to spend in that year. But there appears to be something different about the 2021 budget. Now, because we are in election year, there's a likelihood that this government might not be in power come next year to implement the proposed economic policies. Therefore, what Ken Ofori-Atta will be doing in November 2020 is to present an interim budget that will cover the first 3 months of next year. The move is to ensure that whoever comes to power in 2021 will not have any challenge in spending to meet the day-to-day government obligations with the first quarter of next year. Therefore, the presentation may likely come up with proposed expenditure and revenue estimates for the first quarter of next year. But for some, the main challenge will be the full-year budget that will be presented in March 2021. It has been argued that whoever that might be in power may have to deal with the high budget deficit coming from 2020 and how it intends to finance it. Some have argued that one of the surest ways to deal with it might be increasing taxes to finance the deficit. Again, with the rising debt and interest payments and election year related spending, whoever is managing the economy come next year may have to focus on what some are describing as the cleaning up rather than coming up with any major economic policies for 2021. And who will be presenting the March 2021 budget statement to Parliament? Will it be the Finance Minister, Ken Ofori-Atta? Well, time will tell.
Meanwhile, Ghana's sovereign ratings may be downgraded to negative if large fiscal deficit and public debt are not addressed. That's according to ratings agency Fitch. The UK-based rating agency said in its latest review of the economy that the nation's pursuit of fiscal consolidation, which will be slower than earlier anticipated, may lead to a higher public debt trajectory and could be a source of downward pressure on the country's rating. My colleague Charles Nixon Yebua explains the implications in the following report.
Fitch's latest assessment of the Ghanaian economy specifically has to do with the fiscal economy. Its argument is that the nation's pursuit of fiscal consolidation process has been slower than anticipated, and that will have an effect on our total public debt stock and will also have a downward pressure on the country's ratings. We all know that the country in April was rated B+ with a stable outlook by Fitch, and that was a very positive one in the sense that it sent signal to investors that the Ghanaian economy was buoyant and robust, so investors could shift some of their investment here. They could buy government securities as well as stocks, and this time around, it looks like things are getting out of hand. So Fitch is calling for a very stringent fiscal consolidation process. And that means that we are going to see quite a tight budget deficit. So some projects that are supposed to be financed will have to be deferred in order to be able to contain a lower fiscal deficit. On the other hand, we know that fiscal deficit also have an effect on the real sector of the economy and the monetary economy. When you have a weak fiscal economy, obviously inflation is expected to go up. You also have growth declining to some extent, and if inflation goes up, you will have the monetary policy of the Bank of Ghana increasing their policy rate. If policy rate goes up, then you should expect cost of credit going up, and if cost of credit goes up, access to credit becomes an issue, because then the banks will start adopting a posture not to be extending or advancing a lot of credit to consumers, in the sense that there could be a lot of impairment. So this is a major concern. So Fitch is asking the fiscal authorities to craft a fiscal consolidation strategy in order to be able to contain some of these deficits that could have some shocks on the Ghanaian economy.
With that explanation, away from that, according to a new labor market conditions report by the Bank of Ghana, there has been a marginal reduction in the number of job vacancies in the country for the first quarter of the year. The less than 1% reduction in job vacancies can be attributed to a significant fall in economic activities in the industrial sector, particularly during the partial lockdown period. This leaves the services sector with the highest number of about 93% of total job vacancies recorded during the period. There's more in the following report.
The services sector maintained its dominance as the leading job providing sector in the economy. This accounted for 93.6% of the total job adverts recorded during the first quarter of 2020. It compared with a share of 83.8% recorded in the first quarter of 2019. Industry followed with a share of 6.4%, down from 14.2% in the first quarter of 2019. While there were no job adverts from the agricultural sector during the period, compared with 2.0% of total job adverts recorded for the corresponding quarter of 2019. Further analysis showed that the main requirement for skilled employees were tertiary education qualifications and minimum of 3 years working experience. Meanwhile, Ghana Statistical Service says it will be conducting another survey on the impact of COVID-19 on the country's job market. Here's government statistician Professor Kobna Enim.
The household tracker is going to capture issues related to employment in the second wave and hopefully in the third wave. What we've not thought about is whether to disaggregate it, but definitely with the data that we collect, it wouldn't be a challenge at all doing both graduate employment, unemployment issues as well as overall employment, unemployment issues. So definitely in our subsequent releases, we're going to share with you how employment is playing out during COVID-19 era.
In the Bank of Ghana's report, the category classified as professionals and technicians collectively accounted for 57.4% of total jobs advertised during the first quarter of 2020, relative to 52.4% recorded in the first quarter of 2019.
You're still watching Business Live. The Executive Director of Third World Network Africa, Dr. Yao Graham, is questioning government's move to monetize the country's mineral resources. Government earlier this month secured Parliament's approval to set up a company that could manage the country's mineral royalties. But Dr. Yao Graham told Joy Business the deal can't be justified, and he's questioning Plan's approach in raising the funds.
The Mbeki report highlighted the fact that Africa is the continent from which the largest amount of illicit financial flows go out, particularly from our extractive sector. So there's a huge irony and amorality that the government of the leading gold-producing country in Africa resorts to an approach which, among other things, sees the use of tax havens as a foundational act in the exercise. We can come to the other aspects of the thing. So first of all, the way in which, as part of consolidating Ghanaian democracy, accountability and transparency is built into revenue management as exemplified by the petroleum management, revenue management. This is a complete deviation from that. We should also take that back to the fact that it's not simply accounting for any old tax revenue. These are non-renewable resources from which these things are coming. So the issue of intergenerational benefit is quite important.
Do I get from you, Doc, that there is no justification for using this approach to raise this money because the structure is already there? If we want to even leverage on our mineral royalties to raise money, even if that approach is justified?
No, I'm questioning the approach for a number of reasons. But you see, fundamentally also, this is a savage privatization of what should be a responsibility of the state. Who are the people in this offshore company who are going to be managing this thing on behalf of the people of Ghana? The mechanism has been set up so that it's away from public scrutiny to the procedures of Parliament and so on. It is justified in terms of keeping investors happy. When I listened to the chair of the Parliamentary Finance Committee yesterday speaking on Joy, I was very sad. I was extremely sad.
Parliament has expressed confidence that the passage of the Development Finance Institution Bill 2020 will help strengthen the financial sector in the country. The law approved by the House will regulate the works of non-deposit-taking development financial institutions in the country. Parliamentary correspondent Joseph Opoku Gakpo joins me via Zoom for more on this. Gakpo, give us more details into what this bill seeks to do. Can you unmute for us, Gakpo? Yes, right.
I just did that. That's, difficult to keep recurring.
I know, right.
But essentially, there are regulations and laws governing the operations of various banking institutions in the country, including the commercial banks, and even when it comes to the microfinance firms and all. Now, there's another bracket that they call the development finance institutions. And so here in Ghana, the indication is that there aren't a lot of them that are operating locally. On the international scene, you may refer to a number of them, including the African Development Bank and all, as development finance institutions. Here in Ghana, we don't have quite some of those institutions. So essentially, the rationale behind this particular bill that Parliament is passing is to create a conducive environment to allow for some of those development finance institutions that are not exactly deposit taking, but then they're able to raise resources from international organizations at fairly low interest rates and be able to get them out to people who want to invest in various areas, including agriculture, infrastructure, and some of those specific areas in order to advance the development of the country. And essentially, this bill that Parliament has passed will ensure that these said institutions get regulated going forward.
Okay, so regulation, one thing, but I'm sure a lot of people are wondering what specifically will change.
So the indication is that for a lot of those non-banking development finance institutions that are operating in the country, anytime they would want to undertake any specific activity in terms of transactions, or they need to get in money from outside the country and hand it over, they need to go to the Bank of Ghana for a specific kind of permit in order to be able to do that. But what will change is that once this law comes to being, there'll be the situation where the various processes in registering as operating development institutions will actually be done. And so when they need to do business, they don't have to go back to the Bank of Ghana every now and then for specific permit to undertake specific activities, so that then it smoothens their operations, so they're able to bring in more resources for big-time financial activities.
Sounds interesting, but when is implementation expected to begin, Gapo?
So the indication is that this is something that is still at the level of the presidency. It's still not been signed by the president yet. We're waiting that the president will get this particular document signed after Parliament passed it, and then after that, then it becomes an act, and the Bank of Ghana will then roll out the necessary guidelines in order to get registered, and these institutions can then get into the space and start operating.
Thank you so much, Gapo, for that update from Parliament. But Anthony Fa, who is a of Parliament's Finance Committee, joins us on phone for more on this very topic. Thanks so much for your time, sir.
Yeah, good evening.
All right, so first of all, I want to know what is the difference between development finance institutions and then the commercial banks that we all know?
Yeah, they are all financial institutions, except that the development financial institutions have a long-term view for development, whereas the universal banks, or what we call the commercial banks or deposit-taking institutions, would ordinarily do short-term, 2 years, 1 year, salary loans, they will put current accounts, savings accounts, and the kind of banking that we all are used to. These institutions are financial institutions that we can categorize as universal banks. In the case of the development banks, the focus, like I said, is for long term. And the whole idea is to enable even micro institutions, large corporates, medium-sized businesses, those that have developmental orientation, to be able to take long-term funding, such as 10-year facility, 15-year facility, so they can invest in industry, they can invest in agriculture on a big scale, they can do mortgages. If you took housing construction and the mortgage industry, for example, a typical borrower who wants to buy a house and is using a mortgage is going to pay between 10 and 20 years, maybe 25 years. Now, if the companies that are going to build these properties have to borrow from the commercial banks or the investor banks over 2 years, 1 year, 3 years, you realize that they're unable to develop the project, the properties, sell, have money, and repay the funds back, usually within the 1 year or 2 years that they have the funding. So the clear difference is that the development financial institutions will not ordinarily take deposits like we and I open current accounts and savings accounts,
right,
but they will leverage on some guarantees that the governments of those nations will provide to them. They will leverage on that to borrow from offshore and have monies for longer tenure and also cheaper rates.
All right. Okay, so Go ahead, sir.
On to customers through participating financial institutions.
Right. Do we have specific areas of the economy that these development finance institutions will be focusing on?
Yeah, I think it cuts across all the sectors, but primarily, if you look at Ghana and the media review, in fact, in the 2019 budget and the 2020 budget, the Minister of Finance talked about a development financial institution. He called that the Ghana Development Bank, or Development Bank of Ghana. The name is yet to be finalized. But the creation of that bank is going to be a development bank. And yes, so the whole essence of this is that the funding, like I said, will be long term, and the regulator will obviously be central bank.
All right. Okay, so you spoke about the development bank, the establishment of the development bank. How does that fit into the law, and what difference will the Development Bank of Ghana make in the country's development?
Yeah, the Bank of Ghana would have responsibility for licensing any institution, and I heard Joseph Gapo talk about it, that it's to attract investment into that sector, which is not properly developed in the country. Nigeria has done it, Singapore has done it, and the focus is on the private sector. In the case of Ghana, should we be successful with the establishment of the Ghana Development Bank, then they would ride on the back of the central government, raise funding, and then support various sectors. The sectors that have been identified in the budget, which could be expanded, it's not so exclusive, is, first of all, the agricultural sector, modernizing agriculture, and this will involve, for example, agro-processing. Then it will also help in the mortgage industry. I talked about the mortgage industry, particularly industrialization. And now that we are having the automobile industry taking roots in the country, these are large corporates that will depend on long-term funding at lower rates than they would ordinarily go to a commercial bank and borrow at 20% to finance projects that usually are not completed within a year or two, yet the loans have to be serviced. So the sectors are varied. Agriculture is primary, especially agro-processing, industrialization, and also the real estate or the mortgage market.
All right. Anthony Ifa, a member of Parliament's Finance Committee, we want to say a big thank you this evening for joining us. And that's how we wrap up Business Live for the week. But I'm back at 7 p.m. with the primetime news, business news for you. But do log on to myjoyonline.com/business for more news updates. I am Sandra Esinam. Do enjoy your weekend.